Hello, everyone. You're tuning on Innovative Spain IT Chronicles podcast, and my name is Evgeny Goncharov. You can call me Zhenya or Juan. Sometimes I'm in Spain, I call Juan. And I invite you to dive into the world of IT in Spain. Today we have a fantastic special guest that completely shocked me by his experience. But Jordi, if it's correct, Jordi
Jordi is
or
perfectly
Jordi,
fine. Jordi.
Jordi.
This is a
Jordi.
Catalan name.
Catalan name, yeah. And today we will talk about a startup environment and IT in Catalonia también, but I will say this later. Jordi, welcome. A bit about yourself, and so great to have you today.
Thank you, Zhenya. Well, I basically an engineer. I studied in my home city in Barcelona. I have been developing my career more than 20 years in product creation, both hardware and software products, here in Spain and also in the Russian Federation, where I lived for 12 years. And I came back a couple of years ago, and now I am shifting to the investment world. So at the moment, I'm the managing director of a new investment fund here in Spain.
Yeah, you have broad experience, and you worked in Spain and in Russian Federation, and where else? How you found yourself in the Russian Federation?
Well, in a former life, I fell in love with a Russian woman. We married here, and then she wanted.
I know that thing.
So I moved there in 2011, and I stayed there for 12 years. That was the short story.
Bravo. But Moscow, you lived in Moscow, right? Or in another
Yes,
city?
I lived in Moscow until 2022.
Yeah, as a lot of my friends and myself as well. So let's start with, given your history and some story, your experience is pretty diverse, and maybe you can bring some light to the picture, or let's say to bring some overview of IT industry in Spain, because it's a bit in the shadows, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
In the shadows, let's say, given how famous, let's say, IT industry in United States, and what opportunities do you see also in IT industry in Spain?
Spain is a little bit different than many other countries or regions I have worked with. So, to give it an overall idea, Spain typically is considered to be three main areas of business, which is Madrid, essentially today, especially in the financial sphere, then Barcelona, which was traditionally an industrial powerhouse, and the Basque Country, which is also considered an industrial powerhouse for a long time. Three different regions, three different types of people, three different mindsets, and then you can find sprinkled things all around the country. Valencia is pretty strong nowadays in IT, especially in software development, a little bit something in Malaga. The rest of the country is weaker, let's say. So in regards of the international industry, typically Spain has always looked at Latin America, and typically has been looking there more from areas like commerce, construction, rather than IT. And the IT sphere has never been trying to compete toe-to-toe with international markets. Even one of the things that probably shocked me more when I moved to Russian Federation was finding high-quality standards in software development, because software developers in Russia are some of the best in the world. And then when I have been here and I have seen, comparatively speaking, here the processes tend to be a lot lower in standards. And that, unfortunately, can be seen in the quality of the products, in the type of projects that can be done. There are some islands, some people who are doing very good things, but in general, the level is lower. So that's why probably IT industry in Spain is not so well known outside, because it's different from investment point of view. Typically, Spain has had very bad English level, especially in the senior tier of people. The new generation, there are more English-speaking people, but this limits a lot.
Yeah, I can't agree more, and I suppose that also last, let's say, 5-10 years, I see a lot of initiatives that are taken by government, by companies, to develop hubs, to develop startup environment, and what trends you can see there, like what the shift.
The problem here is the type of business mindset. So traditionally, investors in Spain have been a lot about very traditional conservative investments like real estate, and they tend to risk a lot less in industries that they don't understand. And you need to understand that many of the classical investors of Spain come from very long tradition, very long lines of people who have not worked since the time of the Spanish Empire. And that's where the biggest money of the country has always traditionally been. So there are some business people, but for example, the main difference I found in Russian Federation, there was a lot of people who were investing back after having been successful in the IT industry. Here we start to see some people doing that kind of feedback loop. But for example, in Barcelona, I have only seen really 2 groups doing that. The rest is like, we need to do this kind of stuff. We need to invest in this because it's what everybody's doing. So we need to do that. And when you look, for example, at the legal point of view of how new laws for startups have been developed, what you see is that the law has touched what the government is doing, which is the first part, essentially giving some money at the beginning from European grants, from some pre-seed capital. But there's a huge space after that where there is really a lot of lacking or missing opportunities, because companies can begin, they can do something, then they dry out of money and they don't find angels or super angels tires that you could find in Russian Federation. Here, typical tickets can be 10, 15, 20,000. In Russian Federation, typical tickets at this stage were 50 to 200, 300K even for this kind of angels. And then you went to the funds, which gave you more money. Here, there are funds that are doing that. There are not many. I'm not very fond of many of them. I like how some of them work, but I have seen how others work, and it's like mostly financial people coming from financial world, very little technical people inside that can understand what's going on really from technology point of view. But also we lack a lot of big IT corporations to fit with specialists. In Russia, for example, you have companies like MTS that has been developing a lot of people. You have big corporations that have created a lot of IT industry inside. The government itself, many years, they had a lot of software development, a lot of digital transformation. Here, there are some things, but you don't see this loop going back to the entrepreneurship as often as I saw in Russia. Result, I see this lack of skills in this area, and that makes very hard for the funds to understand what they are financing, in my opinion. Some do, especially those that come from the startup world and they are doing this feedback loop because they understand products and that. But I said, this is not the norm. But those are the ones which, in my opinion, are the most successful. For example, Nucleo with Carlos Blanco at the head, which probably is considered the best venture capitalist in Barcelona. And you see his team is extremely professional. They select a lot, and you see that they know what they are doing. They are teaching the right procedures. You see people from B Combinator. They are trying to do something similar. They are also doing some very interesting things. I like them and they work a lot, but there's a huge amount of demand to get there because, in my opinion, they are the ones doing the right things for the entrepreneurship startup scene here. The rest, there are islands, there are moments. Some things are good, some things are not so good. There's a lot of variety, unfortunately. And we have a complete lack of professional angel investors. There are few, very few.
It's interesting for me to hear that, because let me speak from my side, let's say, of view as IT specialist, actually, by default. And I also work in mergers and acquisitions industry in Russia, Malta, and Cyprus as well. And I returned to IT industry in Russia because of, there were plenty of opportunities. You're absolutely right. As IT specialist, I saw like how fast Spain can provide specialists in IT, specifically as digital nomads, with residence permit. I suppose that this program actually attracts so many talents because a lot of my friends, they went either UK, Spain, or United States of America. There are just 3 destinations actually, and Portugal also. But Portugal is a bit more complicated in terms of bureaucracy. And it was like 1 year, 1.5 to wait legalization, and it's really hard if you want to raise money to went to conference and all that kind of initiatives you need to support by yourself as a founder. And as a startup mentor, just for me, it was like I was not expected so easy process and fast, and 3 years of residence permit, even with Russian passport if you are a professional. So I would ask maybe more about your startup mentorship, how you trying to fill the gap that you see. I agree with you completely. I saw a lot of pre-seed initiatives, I suppose, like just giving money on MVP or on customer development or something like that. But then there is a lack of funding, and then maybe you will receive some from fund if you don't die on this path. So how do you fill this gap? And what actually you suppose the most important thing you advise to your mentee, startup mentee?
Okay, here what we have to need to understand is the type of mentee that you are approaching. In my case, I have done a mentorship for in Russia. When I was there, I collaborated with Around Capital Daily Challenge in Moscow, created by Andrei Taburinsky, one of the creators of Yandex Market, in 1999 when it was in Mail.ru. And in 2020, he decided to create a mentor studio, and I was part of the team with product management and business development. It was also fancy because at the time, since 2015 to 2022, I was the official business ambassador for trade and investment of the Catalan government in Russian Federation and CIS. And it was fancy to show me to the investors, like, hey, here we have a Russian guy that is international profile. But with them, I learned a lot about how to do startups the right way. So we had an investment club. It was not very big. 100 investors was considered small. I would love to see 100 investors grouping here in a business angel club like the one we had in Moscow, because it thrived. We raised a lot of money. We made a lot of good projects. We could attract a lot of talent, and I miss that here dearly. So I had a crash shock course on how to do things in the right way. But when we go here, traditionally here, when people have gone into entrepreneurship, typically they have come some kind of company, institution, or whatever that have a close collaboration with European money, with European funds. So often Europe treats that, especially in medicine, for example, which is the sphere I know better. The success case is I give you a European grant, and my measure of success is I created a company because this money was given. So if you go to IT health initiatives, they measure it just by that. We create a spin-off company from a hospital, from a whatever. And that creation is the only thing they measure, the only impact they measure. So the point here is that typically, at some point, in order to get the grants, someone in the company, institution, group, whatever, he has to become an entrepreneur. And maybe he was just a corporate guy, and now he has to create a company. And that has some friction. It can work, but it cannot work as well, especially because getting a grant and then getting to investors is completely two different things. And then they have to shift at some point. Okay, I go to organic growth, so I don't become a startup, I become an SMB company. Or I shift to go to investors, which is something I have never done because what I know is to do paperwork for Europe. And this is a place where initiatives crash because you come from one background, doing one thing, and suddenly you have to do another thing. And as a couple of weeks ago, I was at KPMG. The partner here in Spain said a very good sentence. Startups are not business people. And because they don't think about creating real companies, they don't think about this. And here, this kind of friction exists. So I get some grant from Europe, 300K, 1 million, 3 million. We build the company, we build the project, and then what? They don't scale up. They don't think about scaling up. They don't think about what a startup should be, which is, hey, I will make a moonshot and see how far I can reach. I will try to raise round after round after round. And it's very hard to go in the middle rounds if you have not done the homework before. And the lower rounds here are hard because there's no money practically. Most money comes from this kind of grants, Europe, help from the government. And when you look at startup law, essentially it's focused on this kind of tier of money. Everything over 110, 150, there's nothing that will help you. There's no fiscal advantage for the investors. It's not attractive at all. Unless you vehiculate it through some kind of fund, like, for example, a capital risk company that can do venture capital, for example. And then, yes, you can benefit a lot, but that means having a license, making funds that are at least 10, 15 million, because less than that, it's not worth creating it. So you need to go very professional. And that's why I see this gap between this 100 tier to this tens of millions. There's nothing. Fiscally speaking, from the law speaking, and that conditions you a lot on what you can do.
Mm-hmm.
When I go with mentorship, the first thing I tell my mentees here is, what do you want to create? A real startup or an SMB business? And that's the very first discussion. Because 99% of the people who come say, I am creating a startup. No, you are creating an SMB. Because you are not thinking about making per 10, per 100 exit. You're thinking about selling this to this place here, neighbor here, and already if I am in Barcelona, Madrid is practically another country, like internationalization. And a startup has to be global from the very beginning because you are competing in a global market. And most entrepreneurs here don't get that. The other point that usually I emphasize a lot is, okay, what's your plan? For example, in Catalonia, we emphasize a lot creating a perfect product. Many entrepreneurs want to create the perfect product, and then they assume that the perfect product will be sold by itself. And typically, when you see the business plans, you see 90% in product development, 10% in sales marketing. That is a flaw, in my opinion. If you don't see in the plan 50-50, or selling right while you are already developing the idea, because you need feedback from the market. You need to make sure that your moonshot will be bought at the right. So at the very beginning, you have to validate. So for me, the mantra is validation. Go validate, get validation of the market. I had a very smart boss in Russia in one company when I was working with the chief of global innovation at Netcracker, and the vice president of engineering told me the sentence that always stuck here: follow the money, don't follow the dreams. So if no one is eager to pay for your dreams, don't follow them. But if someone is eager to pay for your product, do the product. Here, often I have seen this kind of dream, and then you see that the market will not buy. I remember seeing an entrepreneur not long ago. He had been like 6 years creating his perfect product, and it was extremely expensive. And I was looking at it and said, did you validate this with the market? Oh, everybody likes it. No. Did you validate it with the people who will be paying for it? And practically he had not. And it was like, you will die. The day that you no longer get funding from Europe or whatever, your company dies. And you know that, right? Yes, I know. I feel it coming. So it was like a snowball that was growing and growing and growing. And that I have seen a lot in the earliest years of entrepreneurship. Then I have seen, as I said, very good projects, very solid people, especially coming from outside, that bring methodologies from outside. And that helps a lot. But local knowledge with self-feedback is rare here. And that's a pity.
For sure, and I completely agree, because it's not actually like just Spanish. I suppose it's the general problem for any local markets, because in Spain it's pretty good actually, because it's rather big still, and the economics is growing, and a lot of initiatives still supporting
but here,
the development of IT. But for example, in Panama, tell me.
One of the things I have seen with the biggest frictions in this country was regarding marketology. So I have seen a huge amount of my new friends from Russia that have come here. They are marketologists, specialists in marketing. And I remember in June, with one of them, we were looking at, okay, let's make some basic market research using ChatGPT. So we go to the database of companies of the country. Let's see what's in the region. Let's see what are the sizes of the companies. And then we went to look for these databases. And we found that either you had to pay a lot of money to access them, or the official way to do it from the government was gated by the chambers of commerce, and 70 euros per request for one single company. And we couldn't use this access to a database to make a full scouting of the market. And the marketologist looked at me and said, Jordi, how the hell do you do marketing in this country? How the hell do you make these prospects? In Russia, everything is open. You can go to the official place and everything is there. It's public. Here in theory, it's public, but actually it's gated to a paywall. And that limits a lot the traditional instruments that are used in other markets to make this hyper growth, to go to market to make things right. And I was saying, because someone thought it was a good idea to make money out of this, and they started putting this kind of gates, and that limits us all as a country in order to develop our own industry. It's actually like getting a lot of weight on your top and trying to run a marathon against the Kenyans who can go and go and go and go. So it's a pity, because that is what happens when the rules are made by people who don't understand business. And here there's a huge gap between these, the people who make the rules and the people who are actually running the business and find the real problems. They don't talk. Actually, one of the biggest problems that usually are complained by people who are business people here is that how politics is so far from business, and they don't talk. It's rare to see business people going to politics. Usually they are destroyed very quickly.
But interesting, like there are a lot of communities, like or some let's say round tables or something. As at least I heard about it, but I'd never seen it because I'm not very, let's say, experienced in this field, and I just moved in Spain like, I don't know, like 7 months ago. So, but what does any room like here could be found for, I don't know, for discussion or for connection?
Places, yeah.
How it works actually?
Okay, how it works. So yes, there is a lot of associations. Spain is a very associative place. So we have a lot of associations. You have, for example, for professional associations, you have the colleges, which has nothing to do with university or education. It's like unions of professionals. There's the College of Doctors. You cannot even try to become a doctor who is working at hospital if you are not under the college. Engineers like me, we are also with the college, but it's not useful after one law that was created 15 years ago that removed many of the competences from the colleges. So this is traditionally the people who protect the profession. Then you have forums like PMEC for small, medium companies in Catalonia that is like the business people join, they look at what their problems, they discuss them, they make recommendations, they make, hey, we have this kind of issue, we have this kind of initiative. Regional things, there's a lot of groups that are doing things. Okay? In this respect, everything is fine. The point is that there are typically two types of groups. Groups sponsored by the politics and groups sponsored from the private sector. Mm-hmm. And they rarely are permeable. So it's like, here we are, here they are. Yes, we talk. Yes, we sometimes collaborate, but there's not really this closeness. There's nothing like, hey, let's sit down, everybody, let's make things work. It's like, this is my, especially in politics, they call a lot of that like chiringuitos. Chiringuito is in the beach in Spain, place where you go and eat a little bit, and it's like a small place that is my small restaurant with the beer, and it's not very fancy and it's not very clean. Mm-hmm. In Spain, we say that we have too many chiringuitos. We have too many places like that, where someone created something out of some government money to say, hey, I am important or I'm doing something. And then you look at it and it's very empty. Some are good, but many of them are very empty and people tend to avoid them. Just don't even try to give them a chance when something like that is created. I remember a good friend of mine who is a businessman. He had a very strong proposition for entrepreneurship. He did a very good project in his company. And here in Catalonia, he was invited to the cluster of robotized assistants. So he accessed it. It was created by the government. And after 1 year, there was another cluster created by the government called Assistants with Robotics. But it was created by the other political party. And he was crying, saying, hey, the first one was not very useful, but this one, they just created it because these two parties have to compete, and they have to create another chiringuito just because they need to have their own place. And it's like, for me, it's a complete waste of time. No business is coming from there, just empty discussions. It's not the place to develop. Chambers of Commerce, on the other hand, they do some things interesting. Patronales, this kind of places where business people go, they do interesting things. And then comes the forums that you were mentioning before. I was last week in several of them because I was invited to several of them. Typical format in Barcelona is usually the same. Some kind of panel discussions where 5 experts will discuss, people will look, interaction will be very low, and then some place with food to go there, chit-chat, typically to see each other, the faces, and little else. I remember last year, 2 years ago, I went to Valencia, to the startup night in Valencia, and I was shocked completely because they did the event at the same time as the World Championship match between Spain and Japan. So they only had half assistants as expected. But instead of doing these boring things, they put free alcohol until 11 in the night and food, and let people network and do business. And it was full. Yes, there was a screen in the corner with the match, and there were a few people looking, but the rest were hungry, making networking, making connections, and it was very dynamic. So I said, why? And then I remembered something my father told me. My father was the decano, like the president of the IT engineers of Catalonia for 3 years. And he did exactly this kind of networking. He paid for the cubatas, the alcohol at the networking, and he was very criticized from Madrid for doing that for some time. And then someone from Madrid who criticized him very openly phoned him, said, what was the price you were putting the cocktail? Because the first one was for free, the next one was paid. And he was laughing, saying, finally you understand why we did it in this way, to make the connections, we are Latin people, we have hot blood, so we want to this kind of connection. If you sit us down in a conference hall, yeah, it can be interesting, but can also be very boring. And if you go to do business, you want to shocking people, making development. And when I go to these places, you will not find me practically ever inside the hall. You will find me where the people is meeting, and I will be discussing them. And when some kind of young man or woman comes, say, please go inside the hall, it's beginning. Yeah, I will, right now. Because there is a place to meet, to network, to create these connections that allow you later to do things. And here we have to do this kind of networking. Madrid is a lot more like that. Madrid is everything about your network. Your worth is your network. Catalonia has always been more, it's my hard work, the connections come later. And that's wrong, both sides. You need to work hard, but you also need to connect. You need to find a balance between both.
Sounds really very refreshing, and I like the way you look at the things, like you're very open to see how the things are, and this is actually not very common for some sort of critics for the country and for some elaborate on problems. And I really respect this, because only this way, I suppose, you can address them at some point, and the country can address it as well. I would like to revert a bit back to your question to startups. Like, would you like to build a SMB or you would like to build a startup? Could you please elaborate more on this? Like, why you asking this question,
Okay.
and what answers could be provided?
To the people who want to create a startup, or my own experience? What do you mean?
Yes, SMB or SMB. Yeah. Like what they tell you.
Okay. So the thing is, startup is a moonshot. So the startup idea was created in the United States originally, with all these things about Fairchild, semiconductors, etc. in the 60s, 70s. And then we have seen an evolution. So if you want to create a startup and you create it in Spain, you are already doing it wrong, because 70% of all venture capital money in the world is in the United States. And the rest of the world, we get 30% of the rest. And considering that Spain is 10 times less than the UK, so you can see the tiny fraction to start doing something. If you want to go seriously, probably the startups have seen successfully working here. Typically, they have gone to the United States at some point, because that's where the money is. The main thing here is that when you explain someone here what really a startup is, the typical reaction is getting very frightened, like, but it is lying. It is like, how can you make this prognosis? How can you think that it will grow in this way? I say, if you don't think like that, don't even try, because you will crash. And I remember last year, it was already a year and a half, I was helping a startup from Latin America, and I was a mentor there for 1 year and a half. And the objective was taking the startup from the point where they had the product done and working, but they didn't have investment and they didn't know how to sell it. I helped them go to pre-sales, starting getting first customers. And at some point we went to an accelerator program in the United States to get them there. And I remember the day that the accelerator program saw the product, said, wow, what you have is cool. Let's get you inside. Let's make a round of investment with you. And the founder was like, yeah, let's go. And then the guy in the United States said, here at least 1.5 million. And the founder would, what? And then we had a discussion. He said, I have never seen more than 200,000 together. He got so frightened, he hid for 4 months. because he didn't dare to ask for that much money. He was so humble, like, I am not like that. I cannot lie. I cannot go for this much money. I don't need that much money for doing what I'm doing. And I was telling him, you are thinking about your salary from the company perspective. You are not thinking about creating a company that will sell all around the world. When you came to me, you said, I want to create a startup. And I said, probably not, but okay. And this is what this is about. After 4 months, he made up his mind, said, okay, Jordi, let's go. And said, time to market has shifted. And now nobody will invest in this project because you delayed for a few months and now there are other options. So you had your timing and you lost your window. And startups are a lot about speed, about luck, about timing. In my case, for example, in the Venture Studio, we had an agreement for me to create a startup with a development team in Moscow and product team in Barcelona. So I arrived in Barcelona on 17th of February 2022 to do all the paperwork. And 5 days later began this damn war. So 1 year of preparations and work went to the trash bin in a single night. It's about luck sometimes. You can have a good business case, you can have a good whatever, but if you are not lucky, or startups are very feeble at the beginning especially. And one thing that is very important, startups must be set, especially in the early stages, to fast fail if needed. You should not be ashamed to fail, and your investors must be aware of that. In Moscow, the investment club we had, the target type of people we searched for were startups that already made the exit, who had made $5 to $10 million of personal fortune, and for them investing 50K ticket, 100K ticket per year on someone who is like you 10 years ago, 15 years ago, they understand perfectly the risk. They can see that. Usually it's smart money because I can present you my funds, my collaboration, my whatever. That was a very good match because people understood the risk and understood what they were doing. Here, for example, I have been with some startups that have raised money, and it's all about connections. Like, I have a friend, and my friend speaks with someone who also is a friend, talking about people with money, and they don't understand a thing about technology. But my friend recommended me to you. No, do a diligence here, 100K, here, 50K. But you need to be in those circles. If you are not in the circles, they are completely closed to you. Nothing. Zero hope. You have to do then the other way, which is the funds. The funds have 100 requests per month, 150. They take one. It's very hard to compete in this kind of landscape because there are not many funds. There are like 10, 15, 20. So this means that 15% of the projects at maximum can get funded. And then you go, for example, I remember I was at the third biggest bank in Barcelona, speaking with them, and their venture fund was because besides everything I'm doing, I'm the chapter director in Barcelona of VNTR, a community of venture capital investors. Every month I run an event with investors in the city. So we meet all the investors that want to gather, not many, usually 6 to 12, 15 maximum, and we discuss about investment. How is the city, make connections. And I remember going to this office and was shocked because the program was like, for early stage up to seed, the bank had like 1.5 per year of budget. It was like, you are the third bank here. Why so low? No, risk. And I was thinking, hey, if the banks don't even trust in this kind of ecosystem, we are in a big problem. So that's the point. When you are trying to assess this with the people here, they don't understand what a startup is because they don't know it. You tell Globo and then say, yeah, but Globo was a 1 million, then at 350. They have so many problems with regulatory. What else is here? We have some startups that have done it right. Typeform was a good startup. There are some cases, but the point is that there are not many cases. We start to see them. And I hope that these cases will create the second generation and then third generation, but every loop is 10 years. Between the founders that do the exit and then they start investing and then you see the second generation coming, the gap is 7 to 10 years, which is the time for startup to begin from the very beginning, angel, to make the exit where it can be at $1 billion valuation. And that means that if we have now this second generation coming, and the first one was like 5-6 companies, that means that the scaling of the model will be very low. And the examples are not very much. And the voices in these forums that we were discussing before, these startups that are doing the things right, they don't lose time in going to these panels to explain everyone. They do from time to time, you can see them. but they are not organized in that way because they are too few. I have seen some initiatives. I was in Sevilla last year in December for the congress that they did there, called First International Startup Association Congress Forum. Very flamboyant name. And I remember the first day with the real conferences, second half of the day was speeches. And the hall had sprinkled with some investors, but most of them were the startups going to make their pitch non-stop. And I was thinking, okay, you are pitching to whom? I had from VNTR the badge as an investor. In the full 4 days, only one founder approached me to ask for advice, for investment. And I was like, guys, I come to your area. I come to the place where everybody's meeting, not in the VIP area that is only for the VIPs, to see, to talk, to listen. And only one had the balls to come to me and say, hey, you're an investor. I was like, but that's not how things should be done. If I go with my investor tag, I should have a queue, especially if all of you are looking for money. And I'm not an investor myself. I'm not investing at the moment. Well, I will be investing soon with my fund, but it's a very specific thing. But the point here is that the moment you see an investor that is in your area, that is eager to communicate, what are you waiting for? Are you shy? You cannot be a founder and be shy, especially if you want to do a moonshot.
That sounds great. I don't know, Jordi, it was so interesting discussion. I haven't expected you speak Russian, English, okay. It could be expected. But yeah, you have so broad experience and deep understanding of the Spanish market. You don't have pin glasses on your eyes. So that was really interesting for me. And maybe in conclusion, and I call today the last question, maybe you can give some recommendation for someone who is going to make a startup, not SMB, in Spain, maybe 2-3 steps that you would recommend. First, I understand that have a balls to ask investor for advice, and maybe some more.
Okay, my recommendations. First one, find good co-founders. It's extremely important. Most startups fail because the co-founders. Second, balance your team. Extremely important to properly balance the team. And in your team, always add someone who can raise money, especially if he has experience in raising money in the United States. So if you want to create a startup in Spain, fine, go ahead with it. You can get some grants at the beginning, but plan for migration to optimal market for this kind of stuff. So that means probably United States. Fourth, plan your product globally. Because if you are going to succeed and you are only thinking about Spain, someone will see your idea, replicate it in a better place where he can raise more money and go faster than you because you will not have the speed to do that. I have seen so many great ideas here being born saying, if you were in the United States, you would cost already 1 billion. But you are here with the local mindset and you are crawling. And the only reason why nobody has copied you is not because your product or services are not great, it's because you don't know how to sell them, because here nobody understands them. And you don't even bother about showing. So people, when look at you, it's like, I don't know what you're trying to do. But I have the strange skill that I have been dirtying my hands for 20 years. When people talk about artificial intelligence, I have created products with artificial intelligence and sold them. So I know the libraries, I know the procedures. I had that team of 50 developers under my command in 4 different countries doing non-stop cloud-native zero trust architecture products in Russia, India, Belarus, Ukraine. I had people in Saratov, in Samara, in Togliatti. So all day, agile, deep tech, very fun times. I have fond memories of that. Probably also about this perspective that you were telling, I have the luck to have seen this done in a different way. So I can see what is wrong in, for example, Russia in this aspect, or in the United States, and what's right. And I can compare. So some people say, we do this like this because it's always been done like this. For example, my biggest criticism for IT development in Spain, we lack business analysts. If you go to an HR company and say, I want the business analyst for Agile, they will be completely at a loss. Do you want a data scientist? No. Do you want a a business invest. No, I want an agile business analyst for do functionality, to communicate with my customers, to write down everything, to prepare to make validation, to help with UX people, so that here, typically, it's the programmer that gets that from the customer, does something, he validates it himself and says, it works, you are not smart enough. And that's catastrophic because the quality of the result is bad. You cannot be your own, you have to be very, very diligent. And these profiles are usually not there. Or for example, team working. In the Russian sphere, former Soviet sphere, teams are in your DNA. People understand command, team. And I remember the first time I worked with, we took the leader of the team and you took the whole team because of the loyalty between them, because of the synergies. So if you took a leader, you took everybody. Here we are super individualistic. It's extremely rare to see real teams working. I have had the luck of having a good team here. In one of my projects in 2020 during COVID times, we had an excellent team and we did a huge amount of things. We created a non-profit organization. We gathered 650 volunteers to fight against COVID in the country. And the team that were at management were top-notch people, and we did a huge amount of things, very successful. But the point is, here it's rare to see teams. You see a lot of rock stars. So, do you want to create a startup? Create a team. Alone, you can do a lot of things, but if you want success, only a team will achieve success. So a team, you can go together, balance out your skills. If you lack skills, find them and include them in your core team, give them the right rights, and then come on, be ambitious. If you are
Let's call it a day. I can't finish this better. Thank you, Jordi, for taking the time, and it was a pleasure to speak with you.
My pleasure. Thank you for your work, Zhenya, and for the podcast. This kind of informations are
and please don't forget to subscribe and rate this podcast, because we are going to bring some light to IT market in Spain in English, because I suppose that just like a postscriptum, Jordi, I noticed one thing. Maybe this illustrates a lot what you're talking about when you told me about we talk with each other, we were individualistic, we very conservative. I haven't found actually a lot of podcasts in English about IT in Spain. I mean, there are not so many. I mean,
it's the level of English.
A lot of podcasts about.
Yeah. It's one point is the language. Language is a huge barrier in Spain. Finding people in Spain who speak good English and are into business, because do you know the problem? People who are hungry to grow, they will study, they will work hard. But many people who come from from families with money, here we have a saying: first generation creates the money, second one keeps it, third one ruins it. And you see that a lot. You see lots of problems with family companies to find inheritance, succession, to continue legacies. Now you start to see some cases where they try to professionalize the companies, to create small corporations. For example, there's the boom since 2015, 2014, Spain came the first search fund. Now we have 50 active in the country. But it's something completely new, and people are like, what's a search fund? Someone who is a huge professional and who wants to professionalize a family company, because there's no succession, because the kids don't want to continue it, because I have money, why do I have to work? Fiesta and siesta. That's a little bit how sometimes they see us. So the thing is, not so often you find good English with the people who have the money or the capacity to do things. In Spanish, yeah, why not? But if you are doing a startup, don't even try only local market. Startup is not about, you cannot create a billion company valuation just inside Spain doing a startup. The market is not big. Yeah, it's a good economy to begin to create a product. It's fine. Create it, experiment here, try to sell it, find your niche, but start going outside from the very beginning.
Jordi, fenomenal. Muchas gracias.
Un placer.
Thank you all thank you everyone who listened to this minute. It was really so exciting for me. I don't know, share your comments. Thank you, Jordi, again, and wish you a good day.
And for the entrepreneurs out there, my latest project, let me explain a minute what I will be doing. We are creating a new type of fund here in the Pyrenean mountain range. Right now, I'm not in Barcelona, I'm in the Pyrenean mountain range. And starting probably May, June next year, we will be deploying the first money from this new fund. And it will be targeting business to grow and develop this region. It will be a regional fund, privately managed with business criteria, not so much for startups. It's for probably traditional SMBs business, because we don't want to grow or hyper grow. If there's a good chance, why not? But what we want is to give a chance to these regions that are a lot about tourism to develop and to have a good quality of life for their people. So if anyone is in love with our mountains and anyone has a good idea or wants to extend their services or products here or wants to have an office here, we can speak and probably we can find something to do together. It's an experiment. We hope it will work well.
That sounds great, and we shall have this announcement at the beginning. But anyway, Jordi, many thanks for you. This is very close to your heart, what you're talking about, and that's really encouraged me to continue and to develop myself in Spain as well, and bring some light to IT market in Spain as well. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.